Hi, folks. Welcome to the Moving On podcast. I'm Jay Norman, and this is my wife.
Hi, I'm Jessie Norman. Just like many of you, Jay and I have both walked through some difficult seasons in our lives.
And we know just how easy it is to get stuck.
We now have 5 beautiful
And crazy
children, and because of everything we've been through, our home operates on grace.
A concept we didn't fully understand until way later on in life.
Until we actually needed it ourselves. We want to share through stories of love and laughter,
How we were moving on and how big of a game changer grace can be.
in relationship with one another, and how we treat ourselves, and in our case, blending a family.
Something that may just require the largest amount of grace to date.
Preach.
You never know what road life's going to take you on. We have a podcast.
Yes, we do, and we really hope y'all enjoy it.
So today we're recording from the Beau Rivage Hotel in Biloxi, Mississippi. Jess and I have been to see family and decided to make a little side trip, so came down here to the hotel casino to hang out for a little bit. And we've got kids when we get home, and it's going to be too loud to record, and so we decided to sit up here in the hall. And you can definitely tell that a farmer's involved because the cords are stretched out and the chairs are moved, and things look a little bit rigged. We forgot the most important part, an extension cord, so we're having to stretch everything, and our heads are sitting here kind of cockeyed while we record.
Yeah, our heads are being pulled towards the bathroom where the outlet is, which is funny.
And so we're recording today and trying not to overthink things and really thinking about all the messages we receive and the texts and the calls and how overwhelming and how positive it's been. And we want to thank y'all for that, how much it means to us. And for me, kind of being a fish out of water, it makes me feel like a little bit like I belong to be sitting here at this mic.
That's nice, babe. You really do. It's funny, our friend... essentially, she was trying to tell him he was doing a great job, but in doing so, kind of told him she didn't think he would do a good job. And so her husband and I, we were just ragging on her and dying laughing. But truth be told, it really has been really neat, babe, to see just how good at this you are. I'm so biased. But I also have read dozens and dozens of texts that have just said how great you are doing, and so
thank you.
You're welcome.
But it really has been fun to receive all that, and I received some messages from people that I never would have expected.
Babe, on the count of 3, say how many times you think somebody would have listened to the first one. Ready? Think of your number.
Is that counting our moms?
Take our moms out. Okay, ready? You have it?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
9.
3. Oh, yours is...
I was high.
You were pretty high.
Yeah. But,
well, and then in our stats show us a good bit of information. And so on the first full night, so much had come in, and it said that the leading city was Leonard, Texas. And so I was like, I don't know anyone. None of my network is in Leonard. That's Jay's farm crew. So I was like, out of your people... name, I think it had said 29. And I said, name 29 people in Leonard that listened to our first episode. And he kind of listed people off for about a few minutes. And we were at like 9.
Yeah,
9.
So there's my 9 number.
He could come up with 9. And so I was like, it's just, oh my gosh, overwhelming. And it's kind of put me in my head. You kind of go from having fun and your mom's going to listen and this is so great. And then you realize that people are actually listening to it. It sends someone like me into a very different headspace.
Sure.
So Jay and I have kind of been wrestling all day with this, just get out of your head, get out of your head. That's what he keeps telling me, because I'm like, well, what if so-and-so thinks that we meant this? Or what if so-and-so thinks that we're trying to convince everyone to get divorced? Divorce is great. Do they think we're saying divorce is great? I'm just in my head, which is appropriate because of what we're talking about today. Everything has been very humbling.
Yeah, and so we've talked about grace for others, episode 1. We've talked about grace for ourselves in episode 2. And for me, a lot of conversations we've had in the past, I think, being humble and the main part of it, in my mind, finding humility allows you to have grace for yourself and the most importantly, to have grace for others. And I think that's a key part of it. And so I mean, as you look back and how this all ties, the foundation in my mind of grace is being able to find humility.
Right. Well, a lot of the texts and emails that came in were like, drop the rope. That's so great. Drop the rope. But how do you drop the rope? And so we were kind of laughing because we didn't really give much help on how we do drop it. And so I thought maybe we could take some time today to tell our tricks, and so that it could be more applicable. That's a hard word for me to say.
Sure.
Being from Southern Louisiana, that's not an easy word for us. I know with the humility in trying to drop the rope, that humility, it has to be there, because if you think you're right and you think you're infallible and you have that unrepented pride, you're not going to drop any type of rope on any type of day. And so it just takes getting over yourself long enough to drop it, and then having enough humility and maturity to not reach down and pick it back up.
Yeah, that's definitely the hardest part.
So impossible.
Of dropping the rope when you're mad.
Yes.
I mean, humility is a very elusive thing to get.
Feelings are not facts.
Right.
And we ride that wave of emotion right over to that rope, pick it up, and yank it with all our might. Sometimes I have imagery of me holding like 10 ropes at a time with my friends or my family or my children or with Jay. And I'm like, God, Jess, you're really winning at this day. Well, how many ropes you holding? 10. That's awesome. And so it just takes that reset and letting go of all of them and how much lighter you feel. And so we just kind of wanted to go over some things that have happened with us in the past couple of weeks, and what methods we used to drop the rope, or what methods we used others to drop.
Well, and then also what we saw in others where they did drop
That's
the
what I
rope.
meant,
Which,
sorry.
That brings us to
Yes.
kind
Oh my
of
gosh.
a funny story that happened this weekend with her dad. I'll give you a little layout. So her dad leaves and goes fishing. We decide to go join him. We're walking down an old railroad embankment, and he's fishing about 50 yards away, and he's got one pole, one laying on the ground, and Jess decides she wants to fish, so she picks it up. It's an open face reel. I'm not a fisherman, but I know they're not easy to fish.
They're calling it a
with.
bait caster, I think. I don't know.
And so her dad hollers, "Hey, do you know how to cast that?" And she kind of ugly, smartly, put it nicely, says, "Yeah, I do. I'm your daughter. I know how to do that."
Like, have you met me?
Yeah, and so she strolls down and gets ready to cast.
I didn't stroll, I don't think. I was in flip-flops.
Unfortunately, I was not recording this part, but she goes to cast and hits the button on the way back, and anyway, it ends up this huge hornet's nest of a reel.
The reel was obviously bad.
Obviously, and
Obviously.
so her dad looks down there and kind of shakes his head, but doesn't say anything, and then she proceeds to start walking towards him.
He hands me his reel.
Hands you his reel.
And I was like, he's like, what are you doing? Because he's trying to fix my reel. And I'm like, well, I don't want to cast this one because I don't want to break that reel on the first cast and then break this one on the first cast. And he's like,
but
well,
she did.
Hell, I don't want you to either, And so
I watch her stand there and contemplate what to do with the second one. And finally she decides, yep, I'm going to try it. And so she tries it, and there it is. Not as bad, but definitely in a mess. And so
I had messed everything up in just less than a minute, really. We had joined him fishing. He was
45 seconds to be exact.
Yeah. Anyways, it was just so funny to us because here's my dad. He never said a cross word. He never made me feel uncomfortable, made me feel guilty, nothing. And he's my dad, so he knows exactly how to reach me where I am, But I was just telling Jay, if we were small, those two reels would have both been in the water, and he'd have drop kicked the tackle box in there also. And so it was just so loud to me. It just spurred me into, I want to extend that grace that he extended to me. He never reached over and picked up one rope with me or with Jay or with the situation. He could have done anything, and he just didn't. He was just so gracious, and I was just thinking, if he would have just flown off the edge, which would have been normal. I did such two stupid things, and ruined his little, not as little as fishing time. I ruined his time, and If he'd have flown off the edge, we wouldn't have even been surprised. That was the right reaction for that moment.
Right.
And when he didn't, it just was so much louder to me. Because I think with our kids, if I'd have thrown their reels in the river and drop kicked their tackle box into the river, yes, they'd have been so scared for the rest of their fishing times. Don't do that, our mom will lose it.
Yeah.
So there is this fear now that A leads to B,
Well,
cause and effect.
I think too that he's found humility at,
Yes.
later on in life, and we'd all like to be able to find it in that fashion now for sure.
It was beautiful. It was so great, and that's what I was meaning is, if we'd have done that with our kids, yes, we'd have gotten the results, but at what cost? And I heard this week, Brene Brown, she was saying that shame upon a child is like taking a sledgehammer to a plastic thumbtack. So when some friends this week, they were saying, gosh, I need to drop the rope so much more. How do you? And I was saying, well, when I do, because that's not 100% occurrence for me. But when I find myself trying and getting it right finally, it's things like that I remember. I look at those sweet faces and I try to center myself and realize, what am I doing? The Lord left this child's health and wellness and happiness up to me. And what am I doing with these words? Right now, what kind of damage am I doing?
Yeah.
So a lot of times, Jay and I, I'll speak for myself. A lot of times in that occurrence, I'll just leave the room. And they know I'm frustrated, and they probably do wonder what I'm doing in the other room. But if I'm in the other room, I'm not standing there screaming at them. And so that at least gives me a chance to walk away and take a few big old breaths.
Well, and I think it's something too, brings up another thing that you say a lot when you get in that position and things is sit in another seat. And it's
Sit in another seat.
Yeah, it's one of your favorite scenes.
Yeah, and who does it come from?
Yeah.
Kimmer. And my sister that taught us dropping the rope is the very same one that taught us sit in another seat. Sit in another seat and drop the rope are not synonymous. They go together with us. And so sitting us in another seat is essentially, I don't care if you do something worse this time or something better this time, just do something different. And so just choose a different seat, choose a different way. Jay and I, we lock horns a good bit and our relationship gets a bit cyclical. And so our fights tend to look the same and the way we do the fights look the same. And so with us, we don't want the same results. And so we just try to go about it differently. Don't worry about if it's the right decision. Just try to make sure it's a different decision.
We got to see that on air when we were recording.
Oh my gosh.
The last time.
I can't believe you're going to tell me.
I got to see her drop the rope right in front of my very eyes while we were recording.
Because you're an a-hole.
Because I had an employee text, and you shouldn't.
I shouldn't.
I had an employee texting wondering about what to do the next morning. It was 9:30 at night, and I felt like I needed to respond to him.
You are starting in the center of the story.
Well, that's close enough. That's plenty close.
Many times you do. We had gone through 6 takes on this one story. We just couldn't get it right. It wasn't sounding right. And I had even had to kind of rework the audio a bit. And so on this 6th take, I had finally got it to where I felt like we were moving, we were working well with each other. And I'm just thinking, this is it. And I look up and he's texting. He's texting, and the fire from my soul. I was so angry, but I didn't want our producer, we can edit it for y'all to never hear it or never know it. The only reason y'all know is because we just told y'all. The person that we can't hide it from because we don't know how to edit stuff before sending it to him. And I really wish we could figure that out. Yeah. Because I don't feel like we pay him enough money to sit through this, is our producer, Andre. And so we didn't want him to have to endure what was about to happen.
So she got pretty fired up at me for texting and doing it. And I said, I'm just answering a question for somebody.
But to be fair, when he's texting, and he really needs to be hearing what I'm saying, so
and
that
I was, but go ahead.
So
But she got to a point where she just said, I just can't talk anymore. I just can't do it anymore. And so she finally, I watched it right before my very eyes.
For 3 minutes, we're staring at each other.
That's pretty quick.
Yeah, it is. It is, right?
It is quick, yeah.
But we didn't want to say anything, so we didn't want Andre to hear or anyone to. We didn't want anyone to hear. And here we've got mics in front of us, and I want to just come across.
She
the
had the
table.
rope and was getting ready to hit me with the rope. I think she did.
No, strangle you. With
she
it.
did. She did find the humility to drop it. So.
Yeah, so we just sat there for like 3 full minutes doing hand gestures to each other, like I'm going to kill you, and he's like, "Go with it, just go with it." And the more he would say that, the more angry I would get. It was pretty funny, but I was so glad that happened in our second episode, so that it wouldn't rattle us as much as it would if we'd have gotten all the way to say episode 30, and then that's when it hit us. That would have been a pretty rude awakening.
And so, I mean, she was able to drop the rope and find the humbleness and humility to let me have a little bit of slack and get my text out of the way and to move on recording. So, and that brings up another discussion we had where we were talking about humble and what was the first experience that we had in being humble. What
was yours, babe?
Well, mine has to do with work. And
of course.
I'm probably 22, 23 years old. My dad was a mechanic. My granddaddy was a mechanic. Not mechanic for hire, but we did a lot of mechanicking. And, and so I thought I was...
Did you say mechanicking?
Something like that. Okay. So I thought I was pretty a hot shot. That's a Texas term, excuse me. But anyway, working on this machine, and it's down at the time. It's crucial for them to be running. Weather-wise, they need to be not stopping at all.
Right,
and
you tell me about that.
So I'm down 2 or 3 hours trying to put this piece back in, and I just cannot get it with And so I break down and call this friend of mine. He is a paid mechanic, very good at what he does, and he still does it for me today. But this was 25 years ago plus.
Right.
And so he shows up, and it takes him longer to get his stuff out to do the job than it does to do the job. I'm talking about drives up, gets his stuff out. Right. He's done, gone, 10 minutes, thank you, see you later.
That's nice.
And so I sit there and think on that for a minute and think, here I was. Right. I thought I was up here, and I'm actually down here on the bottom, and he's up here on the top. And I remember that being the first time
That's awesome.
that I really felt humbled by another person as an adult and able to look and say, hey, I don't know everything. And it took me a lot longer than that to get it right as I move forward from that. But in what I do, it's allowed me to realize, with myself, with employees that, this guy's an employee, but he understands this better than I do. Let's let him go with it and to ultimately do a better job. And I think that, leads back into laying the foundation to be able to find humility and for what I've learned from life and what you've taught me about grace, that laid the foundation all the way back to then, starting to be able to accept that and deal with it.
Yeah, see, when I hear that, but 2 things. The first thing, I think that is huge of you as in your early 20s to have recognized that about yourself. And
I don't think the full recognition came till way later on in life, but I did see that part of it then anyway.
I just think that's pretty big for a 23-year-old boy to not say, well, I loosened it for him. I got it ready for him. When you hand someone a jar to open, that's what people tease if the second person can open it. And the second thing, I think, because the way I look at stuff is, what a great day for him to be able to drive up and get out of his car and just kind of be the stud of the day. Like you really, set a scene for him to really feel great about himself. That's the empath in me. And you don't know what kind of day he was having that day, and you practically fixed it,
Well, and I mean, he does that everywhere he rolls up. It's just
he's
the way
a stud.
he is. Yeah. So it's pretty neat. But that was what was your first experience?
I don't know, babe. I don't know, babe. I think I struggle more with having confidence than I struggle not having enough humility. My brother used to say, I'm so humble, I wear a humble patch.
Right.
And I think that's why this episode for me has been so uncomfortable, is because I feel like us talking about it is essentially me bragging that I'm humble. And so that's something probably that stems from a lot of that.
Well, I don't know about bragging about being humble. I think, there's definitely humbleness involved, and I think we're fairly humble people, but we've definitely got a long ways to go.
Yeah.
And I feel like humility, there's different parts to it. I mean, you can find humility in certain situations that you cannot find it. I don't care what you do in another situation.
We're on the same page, babe, because I have a lot of humility with my friends and extended family. But as far as having humility with you and the kids, it's very little.
Right.
So I really do think you are right, is there's different facets of it. There's different relationships that you're good at it with and certain ones that need work.
Right.
So, and I think that's that pride. Maybe we'll have to touch on pride soon too, being the opposite of humility. But I think when it comes to you and I, we were both very big personalities and we were left alone to our own devices is that what you say, devices?
I think so.
Or to our own device?
If I can say mechanics or whatever I
no,
said,
mechanican.
you can say. Mechanican.
You made it like a verb.
It is.
We were a
close.
mechanican. And we were left alone to be the head of our family for a little bit and long enough for us to
form an opinion and
Sure.
and get a way of thinking.
Yes. And things are different, in our situation, we're blended. And so things are different when it's your kids and my kids. It's not our kids. We laugh because at our wedding reception, when you walked in, we had all 7 pair of our mud boots sitting there next to a sign that says, not his, not hers, but ours. And we quickly found out that that's not true.
That is the hardest thing to make come true.
And one day it will.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's so much more now.
So much more. But we found out so quickly that that's not the truth whatsoever. We almost want to send out a note like, we were mistaken, you guys. Sorry about that sign in the entry. And I think the quicker we could realize and accept and not have this dream of like, there are kids, they're not just his or her, as soon as we could just like take a step back, humble ourselves and accept we're just like everybody else. Yeah. We're going to have to walk through this just like everybody else.
We don't have the magic formula.
No,
for sure.
And we are not better than anyone. The faster the healing could take place and the faster we could walk through it and just let it hurt and let it suck.
Well, and I think it's human nature.
Yeah.
I mean, they're your kids. You want to protect them.
Yes.
You want everything to be perfect, and especially at that time, everybody's still hurting, and you want everybody to not hurt. And I think that's why it's gotten easier.
Right.
As we move forward, because a lot of that's gone away. But there's definitely, and last week we had a situation, I mean, you can tell them about, or we had two that were.
In a marriage where it's a mom and a dad and their children, if a child acts out and the dad says something about the child, that's that child's dad talking, well, they were being ugly. That is a whole entire different ball game than a stepdad saying about his stepdaughter to the mama, well, they were being ugly. It's the same exact sentence, and it comes in it is so different. It's so different. And so until you can realize that and recognize that and not allow that to implode your relationship. We had a situation last week where one of Jay's children and one of my children got into just didn't have a very good day with each other, a few different things.
Just butted heads all day long.
Just butted heads. And they do butt heads sometimes. And, if it would have been between Jay's children, both of his children, or between 2 of my children, we wouldn't have even batted an eye.
Never even known it, probably.
We would not have known it. We would not be talking about it on our podcast. And the sociology of it, where since it was between one of his children and one of my children, then it turned into this whole, and I think God just said, just pretend this is between 2 of my kids. Just pretend like it's between 2 of Jay's kids. Think of how you would feel right then. And so we were in the thick of it. Jay was with his child. I was with my child. We had already picked sides. And I knew that Jay and I were going to head back to our bathroom and we were going to have it out. And I knew what I was going to say, and I knew how I was going to say it. And God, He did work in my little girl's bedroom, and He just said, I need you to pump the brakes, and I need you to think, what would you do if this were between your two kids? And the answer is nothing, because it was nothing.
Yeah.
And so we were able to gain perspective. I don't know, what were you? We haven't really talked a lot about it, so what were you feeling?
Well, I think I was feeling my general feeling that it was what it was, and it was gonna, it would work out.
You'd already gotten there.
I'd already gotten there. I mean, we just needed to, and I knew,
gosh.
what was potentially coming, but I
Yeah.
still was at that point. Was there, they're two different personalities.
Yeah.
They're going to lock heads.
Right.
That's part of it, and it's all going to work itself out. It does every time.
So we went, I made it back. We have a bedroom that we've added onto our home. And so I went back in there and, got ready for bed. And I just thought, if I can get in bed and almost get to sleep before he gets in here, and then maybe.
So that's sleeping, holding the rope.
Yes. Maybe this won't go down. And I know they say, don't let your, oh gosh, is that scripture that I'm mocking? Is the don't let your sun,
hope
don't
not,
let
but go
the
ahead.
sun go down on your, oh gosh, sorry if I'm mocking scripture. I think more I'm mocking the,
Don't go to sleep, Matt.
don't go to sleep, Matt.
Yeah.
I'm mocking it. I'm just going to openly mock it. Jay and I should not be fighting after a full day with our children. All of our energy has gone to our children, or to getting to them to their different basketball games or different birthday parties. Jay and I should go to bed mad.
Yeah.
We should. We're so tired. I've had some wine. All of our energy is gone. Everything seems way bigger than it's gonna, and then, the
Right.
next day. So
I mean, for us, that worked.
for us, it just feels a lot better to
Yeah.
go to bed.
It's a lot easier to talk about it the next morning,
And that's it.
or realize that there's really not much to it.
Yeah, there wasn't anything to it. And that whole feelings are not facts, those feelings very much felt like fact 1, fact 2, and fact 3. And I had what I wanted to say about each of them to Jay when he came in the bathroom. And so to just go to sleep and hit the reset button was so healthy for Jay and I, because this won't be the first time that our children fight amongst each other. And if we can, like I was saying earlier, you don't have to do anything that you know is necessarily better, and you don't have to do anything that you think is worse. Just do something different, sit in a different seat. And for me, I hadn't gone to bed. I had never gone to bed before you came in. And
Right.
you weren't going to start anything with me.
No.
I would have started something with you. So my decision for that night, my different seat to sit in was, tonight, instead of starting something with him, I'm going to go to bed.
Yeah. And it worked.
It really
It
did.
passed, and we realized that it's okay, and that we can move forward without a fight and having to get down. Because
Yes.
if our kids are going to fight over something that really has no meaning, I mean, who knows what it was?
Oh, it
may-
was so stupid.
And so there's no reason for us to turn that into a fight, for sure.
Right. And I really do think that is a way Satan gets into our marriage, is he uses our children, because it's such a sensitive, tender part of our lives, and we love them so much and we don't want them to hurt. So what was funny though is it was New Year's Eve. And so this is how ugly Satan gets in our lives, is it was like a 3, 2, 1, and Jay's reaching over to dance with me or kiss me, and my child, as we're saying 1, my child taps me on the arm to tell me what happened and is crying. And so it was like, welcome 2019, here is your first problem, And so me being who I am, and going back to the Brene Brown thing, shame is like taking a sledgehammer to a plastic tack. I just kept saying, did you feel like the first second of 2019, while we're all celebrating and hugging and dancing, did you feel like that was the most appropriate moment for you to bring this up?
Right.
And so even the next morning, my child was suffering from those ugly words because my child was crying and saying, I ruined New Year's. I ruined New Year's. And I was like, girl, no, you don't. Your mom's just an idiot. And so we just had a long conversation of, this is where I go quickly. I go very quickly to ugly words. And that is something that I'm still trying to deal with. And it's something that if maybe you get it from me, we're going to have to deal with it together. So I had to really humble myself and apologize to her, for being so, they're young, and I could recognize it immediately because we are talking about this so much.
Right. Their feelings were hurt by what happened, and they, they have to learn how to deal with that and know too when it's not a big deal, when it's not worth telling.
Right.
And so we tend to make a big deal out of it on either side, and we have to learn to, just basically walk away from it
because of the emotion.
And so they can realize that it's not a big deal instead of jumping on it like we might have, in the past.
It is funny, though, because if it is between your children, no emotion. If it's between my children, no emotion. If it's between your child and my child, the emotion is through the roof. And so we just really have to keep things in perspective.
Right.
Why is that? And it may need to be, we need more work on our part between the way that we handle it with each other. It was what we've already recognized, but, it gets so heavy so quickly.
Well, that's something you were telling me about today.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I was reading this thing on Instagram, and it was talking about, if you're in the middle of getting on to your child and in the middle of that heightened just anger, you realize, you know what? I'm being irrational. I have made this into a bigger deal, that it's okay to stop and tell your child, you know what, I made this into a big deal, and I'm sorry. It doesn't make you a failure as a parent. It teaches your child humility to watch it actively happen.
It takes a lot of humility, too.
It really does, and we were taught, by a generation where you don't apologize to your children. My mom has even told me that. Do not apologize to the kids because then they will think that they're in charge. And I believe that that's how we used to feel. But I think teaching our kids humility is going to have to come from them actively seeing it take place in our hearts and in our actions.
And hopefully at a lot earlier age.
Yeah, right.
Well, babe, you got anything else today?
I don't think so. We were going to try to give you guys a break this week. And so instead of hitting at an hour, we wanted to shorten it up a little bit. And so we hope you guys enjoy the shorter episode.
So as the song says, the road goes on forever and the party never ends.
I love you.
I love you too. We sure appreciate y'all listening today. If you'd like to follow us on social media, you can search for us, Moving On Podcast. That's 3 words, on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. We would love to hear from you. With ways you're figuring out how to drop the ropes in each of your own lives, and even ways that you're not, hell, that's just as entertaining to us. See you in a couple of weeks.